we keep doing it, in theory, the audience grows.
Yeah.
Come on, fella. Right. All right. So in theory, that is publishing out to buffer. So we're there. All right. So let me share the this window, which is what we want, which is going to give us our issues, etc. And I can run through. This is a pull requests that are currently out. Obviously, there's just a couple here which I need to cover, which are package updates. As ever, AWS SDK package updates are a little bit of a pain for us right now because we're supporting both 3 and 4, so they are slightly more complicated. Just check that. I thought I'd done C sharp. Right. So let's actually look at some of the ones that are slightly more interesting. We'll kind of work up on them. So we covered this one a bit last time, which is I know you weren't necessarily here, Paul. This is an attempt to basically plug us more into iConfiguration. So we previously haven't really. I mean, we existed before iConfiguration really did, and it's already seen as a step to getting us towards better Aspire integration by effectively making us participate in the kind of configuration handling chain. The main thing that was feedback from Toby and I, though, is while we are happy to support this kind of model, what we don't want to do is flip over to a model which essentially says, "Oh, you just read everything in from these environment variables, and you don't really configure anything else." We much prefer to say our default proposition is that you continue to use basically code to do this. This is an option for folks that want. And what we're really looking for to store more of in the config files would be the things that will vary by environment, so that you can essentially say, I'm going to load those environment-specific variables, but I'm going to actually write it into the code. So we're less looking at, I want a class called subscriptions that has all this information, and more, I want to be able to load my subscription information from there. So that's kind of
because I think you can possibly have both. I know I have to pull up the article I wrote about iConfiguration, but you've got an in-memory source, which is effectively a dictionary. So what you could do is actually load that into your iConfiguration source as a part of Brighter StitchUp, which would mean it will just overwrite the exact same way, app settings development overwrites app settings. So you could actually allow both of these in there.
So I think we're happy to allow both. It's a classic problem of Chesterton's fence, right? Why did we move away? So we originally had under an older mechanism in .NET support for custom config sections, etc., and everything was configured that way. And it was a pain in the ass. It's a pain in the ass to debug, a pain in the ass to provide feedback on, etc. So we moved to say, okay, let's have actual explicit types that you effectively then provide values to from configuration. So I think while we're okay with the idea that some folks may say, I just want to map it directly in, we don't want that to be changed with the default way of doing it, saying I just load it from config. We want to continue with the default way of doing it is the types, and you can load the values the types use, like what is the connection string, etc., from memory. But I don't want it to be all or nothing. I don't need to say, oh, I'm going to load all this up, etc.
Yeah.
So you're right. If we can have something that says, hey, I'm going to load some values from config, and then I will manually overwrite those if I want to with my classes, that might work. But it doesn't fit with the way we've asked to do configuration, and that is in the ADRs. saying we don't want to do configuration that way. So I think it's good progress. We know we want to support iConfiguration more closely so that we can work with Aspire, but we just need to maybe not move away from our own code-based configuration. And there's a little bit, I think it's a bit of an irony, right? In that Aspire is saying code-based configuration is the future. We moved to code-based configuration ages ago. What I don't want to do is then say, in order to support Aspire, we're going to go back to config based instead, right? So, yeah, so that one needs a bit of work. This one is me. So this one is, I'm sure you may remember this fall. We don't have support for every transport to have a data channel. Some of them, streams, for example, don't tend to support that out of the box because it isn't meaningful in the same way it is for a queue where you can have retries and you don't care about ordering. But we know, that some folks using streams would actually say, I don't actually care about the ordering. I'm okay to basically use the data queue. But also some folks want to use it a bit like an error queue. Now, we don't really like the idea of error queues, but some folks already want that workflow. They are set up to basically monitor those particular channels to check for messages that are caused errors that can't be successfully retried. So we're going to say, okay, we're going to support data channels everywhere, and we're going to effectively make them for you if the underlying platform doesn't. And we're going to support, along with defer message action and you kind of reject message action, which will enable you to deliberately say, this thing is broken and I want to push it to data channel. And let you effectively we'll let you put an attribute on a piece of middleware that forms a backstop that says after X number of retries, what I want to actually do in this case is put this to a DL queue. We'll also support invalid message queue as an alternative if you want to separate out those two ideas. So one is I couldn't deserialize it. The other is I couldn't process it. So that's what this is about. So whereabouts is this? Currently, I have got to the stage where ignore some of that. That was a inadvertent change to naming conventions for commands via JetBrains refactoring. But what do we do? So we have some support here now for this idea of this is a slightly separate thing. I'll come back to in a second. But for this idea of saying we can have a rejection, we can catch a reject message action. If we get a reject message action, then we will say, okay, we're going to call reject message. Reject message is we're going to call the channel ability to then essentially reject that message, and we will increment the unacceptable message count. There's a slight change that comes with this. So previously, we had an unacceptable message count, which is just a number that you incremented and went up to, and then it would stop the message pump saying, okay, obviously this thing is really broken because we're getting unacceptable messages all the time. We don't want to shove everything we don't want to drop on the messages on the floor, or in this case, put them all in a DL queue. If it was less than 0, it doesn't do anything. One of the problems with that was always it was kind of absolute. So from when you started to get running your consumer, it wasn't based on a window. So and that was okay when really rejection was quite rare. Now rejection could become more common if people want to have a workflow which involves rejecting messages more frequently. So we're introducing effectively a window in which that count is then used. So you say, if I get more than 20 rejections in a 500 millisecond time span, then stop the message pump. So we make that more useful to you. And then there is, of course, now this reject message action. And there is then these new interfaces, which you can see here, which effectively tell you that you're supporting that. And then, for example, we have some implementation of these in an in-memory message consumer. We now effectively check basically for whether or not effectively you have a dead letter topic. If the message is removed, and we will effectively put that onto the queue and a dead letter topic. So this is working with the in-memory bus. So it works for in-memory. There are tests for unfortunately, because of that rename, it's a bit tricky to find the post proactor and actor or something, isn't it? It's not command processor. I don't think it's messaging gateways. Yeah, so it's under here somewhere. So the message it's a new test for Windows around it. Handled. Requeuing to reject message exception. So this is effectively tests looking at this reject message exception. So we're doing it from in memory. What we're just not doing it for currently is any of the actual transports. Other thing to note is that we're doing rejection. What we're going to do for most of the transports is create a message producer, not create a command processor. And that is because we want to support rejecting messages that fail to serialize, deserialize. We can't use the command processor because that will just try and serialize, deserialize them. There's also an interesting, if I can spot it in my limits thing that I did here, which, yeah. So to test limits, so the trouble with testing this limit score is you need to advance the window a bit in time. We do have a fake time provider, but the problem is when we're inside the loop, we can't get to advance the time. And the way I figured out to do that is really to just have a message which says advance the time, have a handler for that message, post that message to the bus, say advance the time, and get the handler to do the advance the fake time provider that everything is using. And we've had a couple of problems with that before. The other thing we have now is that the message is reached. Yeah. So the other thing, we had a couple of tricky bits where effectively we were saying, well, had a couple of to-dos talking about the fact that we weren't able to prove in a test that the pump had done what we'd like stopped. So I just added a pump status in. So now you can assert the pump status, and it's typically just for testing and being able to exit. That's that. And if you've got questions on that one, feel free. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next PR.
Yep.
So the next PR, Tom is here actually, I think, in the background. So we can talk about Tom's one next.
Yep, I'm here.
All right, let me just avoid going back, hit the back button. We're never going to get there. And just get pull requests. All right. So I will introduce this one, Tom, but then you can feel free to talk. So Tom's trying to solve the problem that a lot of our tests are constrained from running parallel because we have shared fixture state in terms of forms of statics. So we basically tag a lot of them in collections and say, hey, run these sequentially. Tom's having a look at that problem. There's a reasonably good introduction summary here, and there is an ADR. I would say in Tom's, Tom's credit, it fixes a lot of problems for us, I think, Paul, around how we do management of lifetime.
Yep.
So there's a whole load of fixes around how we're effectively need to find the right bit of code. Managing the lifetime of objects, so that there are some issues that Tom picked up on, which is great. The couple of concerns that I have, this is a minor one, which is just that typically we default transformer and message pipelines to singletons because no one
Yep.
really ever has any state in them. But the only other one, and Paul, I don't know whether you have contextual memory of this. One of my memories is that one of the in the Chesterton's fence problem, and it may be nothing. Maybe we can get it doesn't appear anymore because it's a little bit of time ago, and there's been a lot of change since. But there used to be this problem, effectively, that so why was mediator a singleton? The problem would be that essentially you have, say, for example, MVC API, web API, basically. Controllers, and we would find this problem that effectively people would end up with different mediator instances as it is now. So they just had different outboxes, and that was okay if what you're effectively doing is connecting to the outbox via a connection string, because you're going to end up with the same outbox. But where we were using in memory, and particularly, for example, where the default, if you're using something like Post, is to use an in-memory outbox so that we pick up the callback for Rabbit or Kafka and effectively mark you as dispatched or not in memory. And then you could even run an in-memory sweeper against that to ensure that you retry memory. So it's workable, even though it is not durable. That failed because you got a fresh instance, a new fresh, basically, in-memory outbox for every request, and you weren't able to see outbox entries that existed elsewhere. Now, it could be that we can solve that problem different ways, but effectively anything that's not essentially using a connection string that means you would get the same outbox every time, that is one of our major problems with not being static. Now, we have some other things that are static where we're effectively using the memento pattern to stop repeating expensive operations around pipeline creation. But that's the main thing, I think, Tom, that is still outstanding. And it may be that it won't break. That's just the main thing I think we just need to prove doesn't break under this.
The thing that comes to my head with this, I'm really trying to focus on the scoping section of it. Because, singleton scope, whatever, I do feel if we've got a service, it needs to be a singleton. But my bigger worry is, these things need to participate in transactions realistically. Because an outbox that doesn't participate in a transaction, in my opinion, is losing its biggest piece of value, being the state saves or not. And that's really where my head's currently sitting at here around what we're doing here. So I suppose what you've got when you think of a traditional outbox is you have the interface, the adapter to it, and then the server, SQL Server, Postgres, whatever. Maybe we need to do something similar for our in-memory outbox.
So we could, if it's still a problem, then one thing I was thinking is, well, do we just need a connection string to the outbox and then effectively have an outbox pool, even if we only ever really end up with one instance in it, and you just use that string to look it up, such that we would get one back? That would seem an obvious solution to the problem if it still exists. I think the first question is, does the problem still exist? Because the code has changed a lot since then, and it may be that what Tom's proposing gives us a singleton instance of the outbox anyway through registration, right? So I think that's the first thing to say.
That is what it should be doing. Yeah, so it should still be a singleton, but just scoped to that specific service registry.
Yeah, so I think we just need to basically probably have a test that preserves that behavior, that says across two, I would be using the same in-memory outbox. Unless, Paul, I do agree. The other thing is we could say is, well, actually, do we always want that behavior? Would we want to go to the step of having multiple in-memory outboxes? But maybe that would be a separate PR. Get this one working, and then say as a separate PR, hey, maybe we do want to support you having a pool of in-memory outboxes that you can point to by a connection string.
I think multiple in-memory outboxes would be an entirely different feature in my head.
Yeah. So I think what we just need to do is prove this one doesn't fall foul of that old error. That we still got a singleton outbox through registering a singleton, and we've got a test that proves we haven't regressed on that. And the main use case is we do have people here, even here, who don't effectively use the outbox to do transactional messaging. What they use the outbox for is because there's a callback from, say, Kafka, usually here at Just Eat Takeaway, and that callback, because the most efficient method to produce in the .NET Kafka library is not to call produce async, it's to call produce. Because produce async effectively waits for the delivery report to come back, and then effectively only when it's got the delivery report back does it actually then say, okay, your signal to go on. Produce just puts you in a buffer and then exits, so it's fast. And then a separate thread in libv basically reads and fires off the message, and then issues you a delivery report on a callback. Of course, that happens later. So where does the delivery report go? So what we do is the same thing we do for Rabbit is we say, okay, fine, that's fine for us because we'll mark it as dispatched in the outbox. And then even if you decide I'm running in memory, I don't care about transactions, I'm just going to call post, it will still continue to basically work. And you can even run the in-memory outbox sweeper to say, hey, if Kafka tells me that failed after a certain time window, that libv gave up, I could repost it, right? So it is useful. So we need to make sure it works because that is a valid scenario that people are actually using, and we will end up in difficulty if it doesn't work anymore. But that's the only thing, Tom, is just to check that scenario works, and then I think we could take this one in.
Yeah, I can add more tests around all that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. If you feel up for that, that would be great. And then I think we'll feel confident that we won't regress on that issue.
Yeah, another part this PR does as well is it takes a new dependency on the Microsoft options. Are we happy with that?
Yeah, that's fine. And we were talking, I don't know whether you caught that bit earlier, Tom. We were talking anyway and saying Rafa's got this PR in to try and move us closer towards iConfigure, which we've not, we predated most of that. So we haven't really caught up with that. And that would be useful for us anyway, heading towards Aspire. So we might as well get towards options. The hold up on the iConfiguration is we still want to primarily focus on you configuring in code rather than in config. And that one had gone a bit too far to saying, I'll just read the config, which we used to have before, and we rejected it as being harder to work with than, hey, I want the code parameters and properties to be set from config rather than the other way around. But we can get back to that. But yeah, you moving to options is fine. Yeah, no, I think honestly, it looks like it's a lot better. It's a biggest change. We might want to increment the minor version number just to make people aware that there could be slightly different behavior.
Yeah,
but
it's definitely more than a patch, but it should all still retain backwards compatibility.
Yeah, and I think honestly, looking through it, it does seem to make a lot of the stuff around how our lifetime management works much more robust. So I'm pretty happy if we take this one in. Just need to get that test to prove that we haven't, and also protect us against future regression on the issue around getting to the same instance.
Yeah.
All right.
I will look at that later.
Thank you, Tom, for participating.
No worries.
What else we got? This one's a slightly interesting. This is just it's more an experiment we're working on with Darren. So it's a very minor kind of thing. I mean, useful to some people, which is to support basically MTLS for RabbitMQ, which obviously in a lot of enterprise scenarios tends to be more of a default. But we're trying to get this one working using a coding agent, but a coding agent that effectively will learn from feedback. So as we comment on the changes that it's making, it's going to basically take that feedback into account on our comments and potentially learn and update instruction files. And it's interesting, talking about, hey, you haven't always, this should really be a name for whoever's doing the work. But there are one or two where, for example, this one is really out of scope for this PR. It said, hey, you're doing basic consume and handle basic consume, and you only need to do basic consume that cause a race condition. That's kind of out of scope of an MTLS change. So that's a useful bit of feedback for a coding agent, which tends to go, I'm going to fix this other thing. And you're like, please don't fix the other thing. Please do a separate PR for the other thing. So we just keep an eye on that one. We are increasingly, there are some things that we're working on. So this one from me, the stuff that Raf is doing around being able to generate test frameworks for, so our standardized test suites for outboxes, producers, and consumers, because we think we may be able to get agents to help us build new producers, consumers out in boxes. So we need to basically have skills. We need to have tooling for the skills to use, and that's what. So I'm really. It wasn't called skills when I started working on it, but that's basically what I'm working on is skills, and we're working on tools, which is basically what Raf is working on. We'll get back to you on some point for that. This one seems quite straightforward. Someone just wants to add support for using explicit JSON column types because it's a new flag. It won't break existing code. I think we've just got a slight problem with getting a build to run. So once I can get a build running, I can kind of accept that one. And those are all other changes. The issues. Okay, so anyone is interested? What looks like it's new? This one looks like it's the one we're just talking about. The top.
Yep.
We added support for TookieQ. I need to probably go and check on that documentation change, so I will figure out what's going on there. But essentially, we just need to get that documented, how that works. Increasingly, because we're asking people to really focus on writing ADRs. If you get an ADR and you've got code, and you can probably find that an agent can help you write the first version of docs. So I want to be a bit stricter on saying to people, I really need you to see you getting the docs in for stuff that's changed, where people need to know how to do that at some point. So at some point, Tom, we may ask you, hey, did you basically see if you can generate a commit to the docs repo based on the changes you made here, and get the agent to update our documentation to reflect the fact that you've now got these new options things.
Sure. You said that was another repo.
Yeah, so within write a command, there's basically docs, and it gets pushed out to Gitbook. So it's fairly straightforward now. There is effectively just a whole lot of stuff here. We do have some support in here for there's darker documentation improvements. That was me. But effectively, call command spec. I don't know what we're doing in there. Yeah, you don't have to use those necessarily. I can clean those. I might clean those up a little bit because that's not so useful for other people. But it's pretty good at using an agent if you sit in one directory above Brighter and Docs and just say, hey, I changed X through this issue and PR, and there's an ADR, please can you update the docs? It's pretty good at coming up with a PR for our docs repository to go and review that says that will actually be pretty decent. And no one likes writing docs. So my usual thing is I'd rather have docs generated by AI that were serviceable than no docs whatsoever. Particularly as AI reads our docs because it's got an LLM text on it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can do that as well.
Cool. Other issues in here. I'll clean up that. I'll try and clean up the skills for docs as well, so that they makes it a lot easier if we add some skills in, etc. To say how did a doc structured? How should you add stuff that'll help the agent? I think most of the rest of these are old. So I think we've reviewed most of these before, and they are either, in progress or yeah. So this one actually is in progress, but I can update these another time rather than doing it when you're on the call. All right, but I don't think there's any other new issues, which is kind of what I'd expect at the beginning of the year anyway. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other business then? Anyone got anything they wanted to raise?
No, nothing I need to raise.
Okay.
Nope, all good.
All right. I will call the. Oh, where am I streaming to? He said. Okay. Let me find this, and we can probably stop sharing. Why have you done that? Oh, okay. So did that. All right. Stop sharing that. And I can kill the stream at this point. Bye, stream people.